I never thought I'd tell anyone this. For years, I buried the truth deep inside me, behind fake smiles and shaky laughter. But I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of carrying the shame when it wasn't mine to carry. If you're listening, please know this story isn't just about what happened to me. It's about survival, about finding light even in the darkest rooms of your childhood home. Please, before I begin, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and comment which country you're listening from. Let's not keep silent anymore. Let's speak for those who still can't. I never thought the end of my innocence would begin with a glass of milk. I was 10 years old, and my father had a routine. After dinner, he'd sit in his faded green chair, legs crossed, the newspaper in one hand, and he'd say, "Go warm the milk, sweetheart." But when I turned 11, something changed. Suddenly, he wanted to make it for me. Claimed I shouldn't worry about chores anymore, that I was becoming a woman and should be treated gently. Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. Now, I wish I'd never found out. That glass of milk became part of my prison. Each night, I'd sip it obediently. It tasted a little bitter, but I didn't question it. I trusted him. My eyes would feel heavy before I even put the cup down. The room would start to shift, the lights would blur, and then I'd fall into a darkness I didn't understand. Sometimes I'd wake up sweating, breathless, my clothes not quite the way I remembered them. Sometimes I'd feel aches I couldn't explain. My bedsheets would be messy, twisted. I tried to believe it was just bad dreams, nightmares. But no nightmare makes you feel ashamed before you even open your eyes. He always smiled in the morning, always kissed my forehead and called me his good little girl. That phrase started to haunt me, especially when he said it with that tone, like it meant something else entirely. Something I couldn't name back then, but I felt it, and it burned. I tried to talk to Mama once. Just once. She was in the kitchen, peeling potatoes. I stood there, silent, heart racing, trying to find the right words. But he walked in just as I opened my mouth. And Mama? She froze. I saw it. She didn't even look up. She just kept peeling, faster. That's when I realized she knew something. But she was too afraid to speak it aloud. Just like me. Years passed. The milk stopped eventually. But by then, I didn't need it to fall asleep. My body had learned the routine. I'd close my eyes and memories would crawl through the cracks of my mind, bits and pieces, like broken film reels. A hand too heavy, a breath too close. The sound of the door clicking shut. And the whisper. Always the whisper. Don't tell. They won't believe you. Viewers, if you've ever heard that voice in your life, please don't carry that silence. Comment below. Let me know where you're listening from. We're not alone. We never were. And before we continue, don't forget to like and share this video. You never know whose life it could save. Because my miracle came the night Mama forgot to knock. I was 15 when the door creaked. It had been 5 years since the first glass of milk. 5 long years of blurred nights, missing hours, and a constant hollow ache deep in my chest. I had become so good at pretending, at smiling in school, at making up excuses for why I never wanted to go to sleepovers or why I flinched when a teacher put a hand on my shoulder. And still, I stayed quiet, because that's what fear teaches you, how to survive in silence. But that night, something cracked. It was late. I had already curled up in bed, hugging the pillow tighter than usual because something about the way my father looked at me during dinner chilled my skin. His eyes were slow and scanning, not like a father's eyes. Like someone watching something that didn't belong to them, but they claimed it anyway. He came in after midnight. I know because the clock on my dresser flickered 12:03. The hallway light spilled through the cracks under my door, and his shadow paused there like it always did. Like he was giving the darkness time to settle before he entered it. The knob turned slowly. I pretended to sleep. I'd learned how to keep my breathing steady, how to lie still no matter how loud my heart screamed. He came closer. I could smell him, cologne and something sour. His fingers brushed my ankle first. A test. A ritual. I shut my eyes tighter. My soul curled inward. And then, the miracle. A creak. Soft. But in that house, any sound was a scream. My father froze. I knew because I felt his hand stop. Then the voice came, low but firm, from the hallway. "John, what are you doing?" It was my mother. She never called him by his name. Not when I was around. But that night, her voice wasn't afraid. It wasn't small. There was a pause, so long I thought time had stopped. My father stood at the foot of my bed like a child caught stealing. "I thought I heard something," he mumbled. "Just checking on her." My mother didn't answer right away. But the door creaked again. And suddenly light flooded the room. She turned on the overhead lamp. Blinding. Exposing. I saw her face then. I saw how her eyes scanned me, how they landed on the bedsheets, on my hands clutched too tightly to my sides. And something in her expression changed. Not confusion. Not suspicion. Recognition. She had seen this before. Maybe in herself. Maybe in someone else. Maybe she'd spent years pretending not to see it. But not that night. She stepped into the room. "Go back to bed, John," she said, each word like stone. "Now." He hesitated. Then, without another word, he left. She stood there for a moment. She didn't speak. Just looked at me. And I broke. I cried without sound, like I had practiced for years. But the tears came anyway. And she walked over slowly, sat beside me, and put her hand gently on my head. She didn't say, "Tell me what happened." She didn't need to. All she said was, "It's over now. I promise." And I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. But I didn't know then that a man like my father never lets go of what he thinks he owns. Not without a fight. Before I share what happened next, please, if you've made it this far like this video, share it with someone you trust. And comment below what country you're listening from. You never know how many people are carrying silence just like this. The next morning, the house was too quiet. Mama made breakfast like she always did, scrambled eggs, toast slightly burned at the edges, and coffee so strong it could wake the dead. But that day, she didn't look at me. Not once. She moved around the kitchen like a ghost, her apron smeared with butter and tension. And my father? He was nowhere to be seen. I didn't dare ask where he went. I just sat there in silence, spooning cold eggs into my mouth, my hands trembling so badly I spilled juice on my nightgown. Mama didn't scold me. She didn't even blink. When I finally looked up, her hands were gripping the counter so tight her knuckles had turned white. And then she said it so softly I almost missed it. "He did this to my cousin, too. When we were girls." I froze. She still didn't look at me, just kept cleaning the counter with the same cloth over and over again, like she was trying to scrub something invisible. "Something deep," I whispered. "Why didn't you stop him?" She finally turned. And her eyes, they were full of storms. Because I was taught to protect the family name more than the children inside it. But I won't do that anymore. Not with you. She left the kitchen and walked toward the basement. I followed, quiet as a shadow. There, under the stairs, was an old suitcase. Brown leather, the lock rusted and stubborn. She fished out a tiny key from her pocket. I don't know why she had it. Maybe she'd always known this moment would come. The suitcase creaked open like a coffin. Inside were letters. Dozens. Photographs. A small, faded cloth doll missing an eye. And at the very bottom, hospital forms. Police reports. All with her cousin's name. He did it to her too, Mama said. And no one believed her. He told everyone she was disturbed. Sent her away. She died in a facility 5 years ago. I couldn't breathe. Mama turned to me then, her voice lower than ever. "But he's not going to erase you." She took the papers, stuffed them in a folder, zipped her coat, and said, "Get dressed. We're going to see someone." It was the first time in years I felt the tiniest crack of light. But I was naive. I thought that was the beginning of the end. I didn't know. It was the beginning of the war. Because my father, he knew we had opened that suitcase. And he wasn't about to let his secrets go without blood. If this part shook you, please hit like, share this story, and leave a comment with the country you're listening from. You never know who else may need to hear it. There's a special kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. My father had one of those. When Mama and I returned from the clinic that day, the house was too clean. Spotless. Like it had been scrubbed by hands trying to erase something. There was lavender in the air, artificial, sharp, cloying. And he was waiting. In his favorite green chair, legs crossed like nothing had changed. The same newspaper folded neatly on his lap. But his face? It was that smile. That awful, knowing smile. Ladies, he said smoothly, had a little outing? Mama didn't speak. I held the folder tight against my chest, the documents wrapped in trembling fingers. But something inside me, something small and old, was rising. That little girl who used to hide under bedsheets was slowly curling her fists now. He stood up slowly, like a king surveying his ruined kingdom. You know, I was wondering when you'd go through that suitcase, he said, as if we were talking about old photo albums. Mama stepped in front of me. It's over, she said. Her voice shook, but she didn't move. He chuckled. Not loud. Not mad. Just amused. Is it? He asked. You think a few papers from 30 years ago mean anything now? You think anyone's going to believe her? His finger pointed at me like I was a smudge on the wall. My knees almost gave out, but Mama stepped forward and slapped him. It wasn't loud, but it echoed. In that perfect, polished house, it sounded like thunder. His smile broke. That was the moment I saw it, not fear, not anger, but something more dangerous. Calculation. He left the house that evening. No shouting, no warnings, just a cool, quiet walk to his car. But we didn't sleep that night. We knew he wasn't done. And sure enough, 3 days later, someone came to the door. A man in a suit, clean cut, soft voice. I'm from child welfare, he said. We've received a concern about your daughter's behavior. Her instability. There was an anonymous tip. Mama looked at him dead in the eye and said, My daughter is not unstable. But my husband is a predator. He blinked, didn't flinch. Ma'am, I'm just here to follow up. May I speak with your daughter alone? I froze. This man, he was too smooth, too polished. And then I saw it, the same smile, the same empty kindness. He was my father's friend. A planted distraction. A way to scare us. Or worse, make this disappear. But Mama? She stepped in. Not without a lawyer. Not without a doctor. You want to see my daughter? You come back with court orders and a team of women. The man left. We locked every door that night. I slept in Mama's bed, holding her hand so tight it went numb. She whispered to me before I drifted off, He's not just fighting to silence you. He's fighting because if you speak, his whole world falls. I nodded. But deep inside, I knew something terrifying. He was just getting started. This story is real. It's raw, and it's far from over. If you're still with me, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below with your country. This helps us keep the story alive for those still silenced. I remember the wind that night. It howled like it knew something was coming. Mama had triple locked the doors. She even dragged the dresser in front of my bedroom window. Every corner of the house felt like it was bracing for impact. I clutched my pillow with one hand and the folder of documents with the other, like it was armor. Like paper could protect me from a man who had stolen entire pieces of my soul. It had been a week since the man with the smile came. We hadn't heard from my father. No calls, no knocks, just silence. But I knew him too well. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Around 2 a.m., Mama shook me awake. Her voice was tight, hushed. He's outside. My body turned to ice. We crept to the living room, keeping the lights off. Through the crack in the curtain, we saw him, standing on the lawn. No car. No bag. Just standing there barefoot, like a statue. His shirt half unbuttoned, hair messy, face wrong. There was something off in his expression. It wasn't anger or shame. It was certainty. Like he owned the night. Mama reached for the phone with one hand and clutched a kitchen knife with the other. I watched as he walked up to the front steps. Slowly. No rush. He bent down, and through the glass, I saw him place something at the door. Then he walked away. Back into the dark. We waited 20 minutes before unlocking it. What we found made my blood run colder than ever before. A single item. One of my old hair ribbons. Pink. From when I was maybe 9. Still neatly tied, with a small note attached. The note read, "You were always mine first." I dropped it. Couldn't breathe. Mama didn't say a word. She just picked it up with a tissue, placed it in a Ziploc bag, and slid it into the folder. Her eyes burned with rage I had never seen before. "He's not coming for you anymore," she said. "He's coming for me now." I asked her what she meant. She looked out the window. Because I broke the pact. There it was again, that shadow in her voice. That old, heavy silence that told me there was more. Much more. And I would learn it soon. Because the next day, the police showed up. But not for him. For Mama. This is the kind of story people think only happens in movies. But it happened. To me. To Mama. And maybe, to someone listening right now. If you're still here, please like this video, share it with someone you trust, and comment your country. Let's break the silence. Together. They came at dawn. The sirens didn't wail, but the red and blue lights danced across our living room walls like ghosts. 2 squad cars. 4 officers. 1 clipboard. No explanation. Mama opened the door with calm I didn't understand. Her hair still tied in a bun from the night before. She was barefoot. She didn't flinch when they asked her name. Didn't ask why they were there. As if she already knew. I stood behind her, clutching the edge of my nightgown, the weight of the folder suddenly feeling too heavy for my arms. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, "we have a warrant for your arrest. You're being charged with destruction of personal property, threatening a public officer, and obstruction of an investigation." Mama raised an eyebrow, not in shock, but in disappointment. My voice cracked. "What investigation?" The officer didn't answer. But Mama did. "Your father," she whispered. "He's framing me." They handcuffed her gently, like they were handling glass. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. She turned to me before stepping outside and said, "Go to Aunt Rita's. Don't open the door for anyone." I wanted to scream, to run after her, to tear those cuffs off her wrists. But I was frozen. That's the thing about trauma, it paralyzes you at the exact moment you need to move most. I watched from the window as they put her in the back seat. And then he appeared again. From the edge of the street. Smiling. He had a coffee in hand, like it was just another morning. As if he hadn't spent years haunting my body and now, my mother's name. He waved at me, like I was still that little girl in pigtails. And in that moment, something inside me cracked open. Because now he wasn't just after my body or my silence. He wanted my entire story erased. He wanted her gone, so there would be no one left to protect me. That night, I ran to the basement, ripped open the suitcase again. And that's when I found it, taped under the lining. A letter I had never seen before. It was from Mama's cousin. And it didn't just talk about abuse. It named names. Men in uniforms. Community leaders. People who had protected my father for decades. There was a network. A cover-up. And Mama had known, which meant her arrest wasn't random. It was a warning. Stay quiet, or this is what happens to women who speak. But I wasn't a girl anymore. And I wasn't going to stay silent. Viewers, if you're still listening, please hit like, share this story, and comment your country below. So many women suffer in silence. Let's raise our voices for them. The letter was yellowed, edges curled like a leaf ready to fall. I peeled the tape slowly, hands shaking. Beneath the lining of the old suitcase, hidden for decades, was the final testimony of my mother's cousin, the one they called disturbed, the one they sent away to die in a place where no one listened. Her handwriting was neat but forceful. Each word pressed hard into the paper, as if she was trying to carve her truth into time itself. The first line read, "If you're reading this, I didn't make it." I sat on the cold basement floor and read every word. She didn't describe the abuse in detail, not with body parts or acts. But she didn't have to. The way she said she woke up with his shirt hanging off the bedpost, or how she bled into silence for days, it was enough. More than enough. But then came the names. 6 names. Men with titles. Badges. Even robes. And one of them? A close friend of my father. A man who had officiated my baptism. A man who had kissed my forehead in church while my father stood behind him, smiling. She called it the whisper file. Because none of them ever shouted. They didn't need to. They whispered to each other across desks, across pews, across decades, and it was enough to bury every scream. And now I had it. Proof. Real names. Real history. My heart pounded. For the first time, I had the power. I took the letter, sealed it in a plastic sleeve, and tucked it into Mama's folder. I added every photograph, every hospital record, every bruised memory I could find. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I went to his room. It hadn't changed since he left. The air still held the stench of his aftershave. His green chair was still in the corner. But I wasn't afraid this time. I went to his closet, pulled out a box of tax records and receipts. And there, tucked between a file marked insurance, was a key. Tiny, brass, worn down at the edges. I knew that key. It was to the old safety deposit box he used to tell Mama she wasn't allowed to touch. I knew what I had to do. But I had no car, no money, no one left to call except Aunt Rita. She hadn't spoken to my mother in years. I didn't know why, but I dialed anyway. She picked up on the second ring. When I said my name, there was silence. Then a pause. Then, "He's still hurting you, isn't he?" And that was when I realized she had known all along. Viewers, if you're still here, thank you. These are the kinds of truths families bury, but we're unearthing them together. Please like this video, share it, and comment below what country you're listening from. You never know who might be reading your words and realizing they're not alone. The last time I saw Aunt Rita, I was 9. She gave me a pair of lace gloves for my birthday and whispered something strange before she left the party. "Don't let him close the door when you're alone." I hadn't understood it then. I just nodded, confused and a little afraid of how tight she'd gripped my shoulder. But now, standing on her porch 16 years later, with Mama in jail and my father circling like a vulture, I remembered those words clearly. They echoed in my mind like a prophecy I hadn't known to follow. When she opened the door, her eyes were the first thing I noticed. Sharp, wide, eyes that had seen too much and never been allowed to forget. They studied me like she was reading the last page of a book she didn't want to end. "Come in," she said, voice steady, "and lock the door behind you." I stepped into a house that smelled like rosemary and old books. There were crucifixes on the walls, photos of children I didn't recognize, and above all of it, silence. The kind that wrapped around you like a cold scarf. She sat me down, poured 2 cups of coffee, and said nothing for 5 full minutes. Just watched me. Not like I was broken, but like I was holding something sacred. When I finally told her everything, the suitcase, the ribbon on the porch, the whisper file, her jaw tightened. But she didn't interrupt once. Then she said, "You're not the first girl to bring me a story like this." I blinked. "You mean he's done this before?" She let out a breath that sounded like years of pain compressed into a single exhale. "Not just your father. Them. The whole group. They protected each other. Passed around secrets like hand-me-downs. When I was a teenager, I tried to speak up. But they made me look crazy. Sent me away for a year. You think your mother was the only one who lost her voice?" Her hands trembled as she lit a cigarette, even though she hadn't smoked in 10 years. They called it a family matter. But it was a syndicate. They heard us, silenced us, married into churches, into courts, into schools. All smiling, all clean on the outside. I whispered, "So what do we do?" She leaned forward, her eyes hardening. "We burn the tree. Not just the roots. The whole damn forest." We made a plan that night. She would reach out to a woman she knew, a reporter, one who had been investigating a string of quiet suicides tied to men in powerful positions. I would scan every file in the suitcase, every line of the Whisper file, and prepare it for public release. But first, we had to get Mama out, because my father wasn't done. And Aunt Rita warned me he's going to try one last thing. I asked her what. She said, "He's going to try to make you disappear. Like the rest of us." If you've made it this far, please hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. And tell me in the comments which country you're listening from. This isn't just a story, it's a confession. And maybe a warning. I didn't leave Aunt Rita's house for 3 days. Not because I didn't want to, but because every time I looked out the window, I felt it, that feeling I'd carried since I was 10. The weight in my chest. The invisible thread that tied my breath to someone else's footsteps. He was watching, somewhere out there, waiting for the right moment. And just like Aunt Rita predicted, that moment came. It started with a letter, slipped under the door while we slept. No postage, no signature, just 5 words, scribbled in thick black ink. "Time to come home, sweetheart." I didn't touch it. Aunt Rita picked it up with tongs, sealed it in a plastic sleeve, and added it to our growing folder of evidence. "He's getting desperate," she muttered. But then came the phone calls. No voice, just breathing, slow, measured, like he wanted me to know it was him. The final warning came on the 3rd night, a shadow in the yard, a car engine that never turned off, and then the unmistakable sound of our back gate creaking open. Aunt Rita didn't panic. She didn't scream. She walked to the hall closet and pulled out an old shoebox. Inside was a tiny handgun, a rusted pepper spray canister, and a photo of her when she was my age, with bruises painted onto her skin like ugly memories. She handed me the spray, kept the gun for herself. "If he touches the knob," she said, "we don't warn him." But he didn't try to break in. Instead, when the sun came up, we found what he left behind, a set of clothes. Mine, from when I was 11, carefully folded on the porch steps. On top of them, a small bottle of that same lavender-scented cologne he always wore. And a note, just one word, obedience. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to vomit, to scream. But I didn't, because I knew what he was doing. He wanted me to break. He wanted to scare me into silence. But instead, I recorded a video. That same night, with Aunt Rita behind the camera and the Whisper file in my lap, I sat down and began to speak. I didn't name him, not yet, but I told the world about the house, about the milk, about the basement, the suitcase, the ribbons, the shadows, and the other girls. We uploaded it anonymously, sent copies to reporters, activists, agencies. We even sent one to Mama's lawyer, hoping, praying, that someone would listen before he made me vanish like the rest. That video got 17 views the first night, then 93, then 2,000. By the morning, it had crossed 40,000. And then, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the police. It was him. If you're still here, please, don't scroll past this. Like the video. Share it with anyone who might be living in silence. And comment your country below. Your voice might be the one that keeps another woman alive tonight. I saw him through the peephole. Same face, same pressed shirt, same calm, curated expression that made people trust him, love him, defend him. But I knew better. Behind that polished exterior was the man who took my childhood, stitched lies into my skin, and then tried to erase me from the world. Aunt Rita stood beside me, gun hidden behind her back. I saw the tremble in her hand, not from fear, but rage. Rage that had lived in her bones since long before mine had started to ache. He rang the doorbell again. Then, like he was greeting a neighbor, he leaned close and said, "Come out, sweetheart. You've made a mess, but it's not too late to clean it up." My stomach turned. Sweetheart. The same word he used before he locked my door. Before the powder and the milk. Before the blackouts. Aunt Rita whispered, "He wants a scene. If we open that door, he wins." But I stepped forward. Slowly. And I spoke, not to him, but through the door. "No more secrets," I said. "No more silence. Everyone knows now." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Do you think they'll believe an old woman and a broken girl? You're not the first to try this, you know. They all come crawling back eventually. I'm still your father." That word hit like a knife. But I had something sharper now. Truth. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit play. The video. The one we had recorded. My voice echoed through the room. This is for the girls who were told to be quiet. For the girls who woke up in clothes they don't remember putting on. For the daughters who carry their father's shadows instead of love. I pressed it against the door so he could hear every word. His voice changed. No more calm. Just venom. "You think that'll stop me?" I finally answered him. "No. But it'll bury you." I stepped away, and Aunt Rita called the police. They came within minutes. He was still outside when they arrived, still smiling, but this time, it didn't reach his eyes. He said we were hysterical, that we were confused, that he was just checking in on his niece. But the video was already in the hands of reporters. The whisper file was circulating through legal offices like wildfire. He was taken in for questioning. Not charged. Not yet. But it was a start. That night, for the first time in over a decade, I fell asleep without clutching a pillow to my chest. Without locking the door 5 times. Without pretending I was somewhere else. I wasn't safe yet, but I was finally seen. If this chapter reached your heart, please hit like, share this story, and comment which country you're watching from. There are people out there still waiting to speak. Your share might give them the courage to. The video went viral overnight. By morning, it wasn't just a story, it was a movement. Women from towns I'd never heard of began sending messages. Anonymous emails. Shaky voice notes. Most of them started the same way. I've never told anyone this before, but each one was a wound, reopened. Each one was proof that my father was just one mask in a room full of monsters. But beneath the support, beneath the flood of messages and reposts, was something darker. Threats. Take it down. You'll regret this. You don't know who you're dealing with. Some messages were from strangers. But a few? From names I recognized. Men who had been at my birthday parties. Neighbors who used to wave from across the street. Teachers. Deacons. One even came from a retired officer, a man who once investigated Mama's cousin, the one who went crazy. Aunt Rita pulled me aside that afternoon. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were red. "Sweetheart," she said, "this isn't just about your father anymore." The video cracked something open. You kicked the hornet's nest. And now, they want to bury you before you dig any deeper. I looked at her. But we have the truth. We have the whisper file. She nodded. We do. But they've hidden their lies for decades. Truth doesn't scare them. Exposure does. That evening, we checked the mailbox. Inside wasn't a letter. It was a flash drive. No note. No return address. We stared at it for a long time before plugging it into Aunt Rita's laptop. The file had no name. Just a single video. We clicked play. It was grainy. Old. But clear enough to make my blood run cold. There he was. My father. In a room I didn't recognize. Sitting across from a man I'd never seen. But what they were saying. "You sure the girl's quiet?" the stranger asked. My father laughed. "She won't talk. She doesn't even remember half of it." The stranger nodded. "Good. The less they know, the cleaner this stays." My vision blurred. My throat closed. This wasn't just abuse. This was organized, planned. And it wasn't just me. I watched the whole video. My hand never left the mouse. They'd filmed the conversations. Maybe as blackmail. Maybe to control each other. Maybe just because they never expected anyone to find it. But now I had it. And suddenly I understood. The whisper file wasn't a collection of pain. It was a map. And I was holding the key. If you're still with me, if this story moves something inside you, please like, share, and comment your country below. You might think one voice doesn't matter. But it does. Especially when it echoes. When you grow up in a small town, churches aren't just places of worship. They're where secrets go to kneel. The church where I was baptized stood at the top of Willow Hill, white columns glowing in the sunrise like purity itself. My father sat on the board there. For decades. I used to think that meant something honorable. But the video on that flash drive, his smirk, his words changed everything. He wasn't just abusing power behind closed doors. He was blessed for it. Protected by it. Aunt Rita made a call to the reporter she knew, a woman named Nora who had spent the last 10 years tracking down predators, hiding behind collars and courtroom benches. When she watched the video, she didn't flinch. She just said one word, finally. She told us to meet her at the church that Sunday. Not during the service. After. It was cold that morning. Windy. I wore Mama's scarf and kept the flash drive in my coat pocket like it was a grenade. Nora met us in the parking lot, trench coat and camera in hand. You ready for this? She asked. I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. She led us around the side, where the maintenance door was already ajar. Someone on the inside tipped me off, she whispered. There's a room. Below the chapel. Not on the official plans. Aunt Rita's hand squeezed mine. We descended the narrow staircase behind the organ, the air thick with mildew and something else, fear that had been living in the walls for years. The room was small. Concrete. No windows. No light except for the beam of Nora's flashlight. And there it was. A filing cabinet. Rusted. Chained shut. But beside it, a bookshelf, old Bibles, hymnals, and a box labeled only with a single letter. L. We pried it open. Inside were tapes. Photographs. Handwritten notes in shaky cursive. Code names. Meeting times. Places. And names. Real names. My father's. The man from the video. 2 judges. A youth pastor. And even the name of the man who once investigated Mama's cousin's mental health episode. Aunt Rita staggered backward. This is how they stayed clean, she said. They kept the evidence so they could control each other. I whispered, blackmail. Nora nodded. And now it's yours. But before we could speak again, we heard footsteps above. Slow. Deliberate. The creak of the wooden floorboards. The shuffle of heavy shoes. Then, the sound of the maintenance door slamming shut. Locked. We were trapped. But I wasn't 10 anymore. And I wasn't afraid. Because I had the truth. I had the proof. And this time, I wasn't alone. Viewers, if this story is reaching you, please don't stop here. Like this video. Share it. And comment your country below. Someone somewhere might be watching who's still too afraid to speak. The room felt colder the moment that door slammed shut. For a second, all I could hear was the thudding of my own heart. Aunt Rita backed against the wall, her eyes darting toward the stairwell. Nora, calm but alert, reached for her camera bag. She whispered, "We're not alone." The footsteps above us had stopped. Whoever locked us in didn't need to watch. They just needed to send a message, "You've gone too far." But they were too late. Because what we had found couldn't be buried anymore. While Aunt Rita tried to call for help, no signal, of course, I dug back into the box labeled L. That's when I saw it, a small black VHS tape, the label peeling off. Someone had scribbled 2 words in faded red ink, choir room. Nora gently took it from my hands. We can digitize it. Back at my van. But we've got to get out first. We searched every wall of that cement room, fingers skimming over stone and dust. And then, behind a shelf of old hymnals, I found it, a panel in the wall that didn't quite match. Lighter wood, scratched at the base. I pulled. A second door. A tunnel, narrow and dark, barely tall enough to stand in. Nora clicked on her flashlight. Let's go. We crawled through the damp corridor, each step echoing like we were inside a secret throat swallowing us whole. And finally, after what felt like a mile of crawling, we emerged. Behind the altar. Right under the pulpit. It was empty. No congregation. Just silence. But I could still smell it. Lavender cologne. He had been there. We made it back to the van without another word. Nora worked fast, her laptop hooked to a converter, fingers moving like lightning. Then the screen flickered. And what we saw stole every last breath from our lungs. The choir room. A decade ago. Maybe more. Young girls my age back then lined up in white robes. Singing. My father stood near the piano. Another man, one of the names from the whisper file, paced behind the girls. Then, the music stopped. The camera kept rolling. And what followed wasn't a service. The footage didn't show anything graphic. No violent scenes. But the way he dismissed certain girls, the way he pointed at one, told her to stay behind. The way the others left quietly, their eyes downward, as if trained to obey. It was enough. Enough to make it clear. They had been doing this for years. Not just to me. To dozens. Nora looked at me, her voice almost breaking. You're not just telling your story anymore. You're telling all of theirs. We uploaded the tape that night. Not the whole thing, just enough. Just the moment where the man pointed to the girl and closed the door behind her. The world didn't need to see what followed. They just needed to understand what happened when no one was watching. Within hours, the video had over 1 million views. It made national headlines. The headline read, "Tape emerges from secret church archive. Whistleblower speaks out." And that's when they came. Not reporters. Not police. Them. The ones who had kept this secret burning in shadows for decades. They didn't want to threaten us. This time, they wanted to offer us a deal. If this chapter shook you, I need you to do one thing: share it. Like it. Comment which country you're watching from. We are not just telling a story anymore. We are telling the truth. They came in black cars. Unmarked. Tinted windows. Parked 2 houses down from Aunt Rita's like shadows pretending to be vehicles. I saw them through the curtains. 2 men stepped out. Suits too clean. Shoes too polished. The kind of polish that comes from a life spent stepping on people. They didn't ring the bell. They slipped a letter through the door. No envelope. No signature. Just 3 short lines, typed in bold. We will protect your mother. We will make this go away. Delete the footage. Return the file. Stay silent. And at the bottom, a check. A real one. With more zeros than I'd ever seen in my life. I didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. Aunt Rita didn't say a word. She just sat at the kitchen table, staring at it. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from memory. Because she remembered, too. 30 years ago, she was offered the same deal. She took it. And she hated herself every day since. I whispered, they're not afraid of the truth. They're afraid of the world seeing it. Nora was on speakerphone by then. She had seen these tactics before. They're testing you, she said. If you back down now, it's over. For all of you. And for all the girls they'll go on to hurt. I looked down at the check. It had red smudges on the corner. Ink? Maybe. But it looked like blood. Maybe that was the point. I tore it in half. Then again. Then again. Until it looked like confetti from the funeral of their lies. And I didn't stop there. We printed copies of the whisper file. Duplicated the church footage. Sent it to outlets across the globe. We gave them no one target to silence. We became many. But power doesn't give up quietly. Later that night, we found the back window smashed in. Aunt Rita's photo albums were shredded. A line of salt was poured across the kitchen counter, a sign we both understood. It meant, "We're watching." They didn't need to say it out loud. But they made one mistake. They touched Mama's letters. Those pages, her pain, her fight, her hidden strength, meant more to me than life itself. And they tried to destroy them. That's when I changed. I wasn't the broken little girl anymore. I wasn't the crying teenager. I was a woman with nothing left to lose. And the next move would be mine. If you're still listening, I need you. I need your voice, your strength, your share. Like this video. Share it with anyone who needs to know they are not crazy. They are not alone. And they are not silent anymore. Drop a comment. Tell me which country you're watching from. They thought they had broken her. That a few nights in a holding cell, stripped of her dignity and surrounded by whispers, would turn my mother back into the quiet wife she once was, the one who kept her eyes down at dinner and wiped tears into dish rags after midnight. But they underestimated her. Because when Mama walked through Aunt Rita's door, she didn't look like someone who had just been released from a cell. She looked like someone who had been reborn inside it. Her eyes scanned the house like a soldier walking back into enemy territory, calm but alert. She held a paper bag in one hand, her wrists still marked red from the cuffs. I ran to her. I didn't cry. I had already poured out every tear I had. She cupped my face and said, "I saw the video. I saw everything." Aunt Rita whispered, "They sent a check." Mama nodded like she expected that. They always pay before they bury you. She reached into the paper bag and pulled out her notebook, the one they had confiscated when she was arrested. She'd managed to sneak it back. Inside were scribbled phone numbers, names she remembered from years ago. Secret meetings. Unexplained disappearances. Patterns. "I started writing everything down the night I first saw your bruises," she said. My breath caught. You knew back then?" "I didn't know," she said softly, "but I felt it." A mother knows when something sacred is being taken from her child. Her voice cracked, but she kept talking. "They tried to convince me I was crazy. Said I was emotional. Said I was making up stories. But I remembered my cousin. I remembered what they did to her. And I swore, if they ever touched you the way they touched her, I'd burn this whole system down." The room was silent. Then Nora spoke from across the kitchen. "You're not alone anymore. We have names, documents, videos. The only thing we're missing is your voice." Mama looked at me. I nodded. And that night, for the first time, we recorded together. Me, Mama, and Aunt Rita. 3 generations of silence breaking. Mama didn't hold back. She talked about the nights she found laundry missing from the basket. About bruises on my inner thighs I've tried to blame on gym class. About the sound of my door creaking at midnight and how she stood outside it, frozen listening for what she already feared. And then, she said something I'll never forget. I stayed quiet too long. And my silence became his weapon. That clip alone was shared over 10 million times in 3 days. The pressure built. Legal inquiries opened. The press called it the Willow Hill scandal. Our little white church, the symbol of everything good, now held the sins of generations under its floorboards. And yet, even as the world listened, the men stayed quiet. They hadn't run. They hadn't denied. They were waiting. Because cowards don't run from the light. They wait for it to burn out. If you're listening, if you've made it this far, don't let this story fade. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from? Because the light is only as strong as those who choose to carry it. The hardest part of this journey wasn't telling my truth. It was walking back into the place that buried it. Aunt Rita parked outside the Willow Hill Church before sunrise. Fog blanketed the road. The bell tower loomed above us like a monument built from the bones of the silenced. Mama sat in the back seat, hands folded, notebook in her lap. Her eyes never left the front doors. "He's in there," she whispered. She didn't need to say his name. We all knew who she meant. My father had returned to the pulpit quietly, strategically. not as a preacher, but as a helper. The kind who passed out hymnals, greeted newcomers, and kept his name off every headline. It was his favorite disguise, the kind old man who carried chairs and complimented the choir girls. But we had one goal that morning: to face them. All of them. Because it wasn't just him. We'd gathered the names. The ones from the whisper file. The ones from the tapes. The ones who nodded along in meetings, signed off on transfers, or turned off their hearing when a girl's sobs became too hard to ignore. They all sat in the front pew. Suits. Polished shoes. Their Bibles lined up neatly like shields. Nora joined us at the church doors. She wore a hidden mic and held a GoPro under her scarf. She leaned in and said, "Are you sure?" Mama opened the door, and we walked in. Heads turned. Whispers spread like wildfire through the congregation. Some of the women nodded at us. Quietly. Almost afraid. Like they'd wanted to speak for years, but forgot how. My father didn't stand. He just sat there, smiling, as if daring me to speak. So I did. I walked straight to the center aisle and turned to the crowd. My voice didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. I grew up in this church, I began. I was baptized in that font. I sang in that choir. And every time I closed my eyes to pray, I was begging someone, anyone, to make it stop. Gasps echoed across the room. Mama stood beside me. And Rita too. And then I said it. Those men in the pew, they weren't just witnesses. They were architects. They built the silence brick by brick, year after year. One of the deacons stood, red-faced. "This is slander." Nora stepped forward. "It's evidence." She placed the whisper file on the pulpit, the flash drive on top. Another woman stood up, an older woman with silver hair and trembling hands. "I knew," she said. "I knew what they did to my niece. I begged the pastor to report it." Then another voice. "I was 12. I told the choir director. He told me to pray harder." The dam had broken. Dozens of voices. All at once. Confessions. Stories. Sobs. And for the first time, they weren't whispered. They were heard. My father didn't speak. He walked out of the church, but not before turning back to look at me. His smile was gone. And in its place, fear. Because he finally knew the girl he silenced had become the woman who would bury him. If you've made it this far, thank you. Please like this video, share it, and tell me what country you're watching from. Every voice adds weight to this story. Every share carries a girl closer to her own truth. There was no courtroom, no jury, no judge in a black robe banging a gavel. But what we lived through next was still a trial in the court of public truth. And it was brutal. The press circled like vultures, feeding on every headline. Small-town church hides decades of abuse. Whistleblower family releases secret archive. The women who wouldn't stay silent. They made us sound brave. But bravery isn't what I felt. What I felt was exhausted. Every word we spoke was dissected. Every photo of me as a child became part of someone else's article, someone else's post. Some praised us. Others called us liars, opportunists, sinners trying to destroy good men. Good men. That phrase, it never stopped hurting. My father was still free. He walked the streets with the same casual cruelty as before, head held high, shirt tucked in, waving to neighbors who pretended not to know. But things were shifting. Slowly, then all at once. 3 more women from town came forward. One was my old classmate, another, my former babysitter, and one was a teacher. Their stories were different. The details changed. But the patterns? The fear? The rituals of grooming, manipulation, and silence? Identical. We were no longer outliers. We were evidence. The district attorney, pressured by public outrage and mountains of leaked material, finally called for a formal inquiry. Depositions, witness lists, subpoenas. They didn't use the word trial in public. But behind closed doors, the language changed. Survivor testimony. multiple accused, pattern of behavior. The term they used most? Institutional failure. And then, one day, we got the call. From the courthouse. A date had been set. It wouldn't be a criminal case, not yet. But it would be a public hearing. We would stand. We would speak. On record. Under oath. Mama, Aunt Rita, and I sat in silence for a long time after that call. Then Mama said something I'll never forget. They tried to silence me. Then you. Then her. But they never expected us to stand together. I asked her if she was scared. She said, yes. But I'm not quiet anymore. Neither was I. And that night, I opened a box I hadn't touched since I was 15. Inside it, my old ribbon, the one he left on the porch, still stained, still trembling with memory. But I didn't hide it this time. I brought it with me, to the hearing, not as a symbol of what he stole, but of what I survived. If you're still here, this story is becoming more than just words. It's a reckoning. Like this video. Share it with someone who's still afraid. And drop a comment. Tell me what country you're watching from. Let them know we're watching, too. They say a courtroom is where justice lives. But the truth is, sometimes justice isn't about verdicts. It's about visibility. The day of the hearing, the courthouse lobby was full. Reporters. Survivors. Curious townsfolk pretending they just happened to be in the neighborhood. But I saw them. The men from the pew. Some with their collars on. Some in suits. All stone-faced, flanked by lawyers with silver briefcases and eyes that never blinked. Mama held my hand until the very last second. Aunt Rita sat behind us, her palm pressed to her chest, holding the little gold crucifix she stopped believing in years ago. The judge entered. No jury, this wasn't that kind of trial. Just a hearing. But it might as well have been the world watching. I was the first called. I didn't tremble as I stood. Didn't flinch when my name was read. Didn't lower my gaze when my father turned to look at me from his row of defense. I took the oath, sat at the table, and faced the panel. And I spoke. I didn't use graphic language. I didn't need to. I told them about the milk, the dizzy nights, the bruises that didn't match my stories. I told them about the way my clothes were folded differently when I woke, about the ribbon on the porch, about the man in the black car offering silence in exchange for peace. I said, there was no moment of violence you can measure, no broken bones. But my soul has limped for decades. I showed them the whisper file, the footage, the letter from my mother's cousin, the names, the codes, the rituals, and finally I held up the ribbon. Not to accuse, but to remember. Because that ribbon, once a tool of shame, had become my flag. I told them the church wasn't a sanctuary. It was a vault where girls' cries were sealed behind stained glass and chanted hymns. When I finished, I turned to my father. And for the first time, I saw it not pride, not arrogance, not even anger. Fear. He knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about ending a cycle so old, it had been stitched into generations. Mama testified next. Then Aunt Rita. And then came women I didn't even know. From nearby towns. From the next state. One by one, they stood, told their truth. Piece by piece, the lie they had built, this image of respectability, leadership, godliness began to crumble. They didn't shout. They remembered. Loud enough for the whole room to finally hear. And when it was all over, the judge didn't drop a gavel, but she looked at the panel and said, these women deserve more than acknowledgement. They deserve accountability. And that was when the real miracle happened. Because that day, the silence finally ended. If you felt that chapter in your heart, let it echo further. Please like, share, and leave a comment with your country. Someone might read it and realize they're not alone anymore. They didn't fall all at once. Predators rarely do. They fall in whispers, just like they rose. The first to be removed was the youth pastor. The video footage from the choir room had been too damning to spin. He resigned the morning after the hearing, citing stress and spiritual exhaustion. But the truth followed him like smoke. His name hit the headlines. Families came forward. Donations to the church dried up. His house was egged. Quietly, he left town. The next was the judge. One of the names from the whisper file, someone who, years ago, signed the order to institutionalize Mama's cousin. His name wasn't in any testimony, but we had documentation. And now the media had it too. He denied everything. Until an old nurse from the hospital, long retired, sent in her own handwritten account. She remembered the cousin, remembered the bruises, remembered the visit from a suited man who told us not to ask questions. The judge retired the next day. No apology, no statement, just silence. And my father? He fought harder. He sued me for defamation, claimed the tapes were doctored, hired a PR team to paint himself as the heartbroken father of a disturbed daughter. But every time he showed his face, someone else stood up. Another survivor, another voice, a student from the school he used to substitute at, a former choir girl, even a woman in her 70s who said, "He wasn't just your monster. He was mine, too." His lawsuit crumbled. His mask slipped. And in the end, he disappeared. No farewell, no arrest, no justice in handcuffs. But he lost everything: the respect, the comfort, the control. And in its place, he got what he feared most: exposure. The men who once sat proudly in the front pew no longer came to church. Some were reassigned. Some resigned. One was found dead in his study. No foul play, but I'll let you draw your own conclusions. What mattered wasn't their punishment. It was the fact that we were no longer alone, because the voices they tried to erase had become too loud to ignore. We didn't win with weapons. We won with witnesses. And I want you to remember this, especially if you're watching from a place where your voice still feels small. You don't have to scream to change the world. You just have to speak. If you've stayed this long, please like this video, share it, and comment your country. There's one more chapter to go. One more truth I have to share. I didn't recognize her at first. The girl in the mirror. She looked like me, but not the me I remembered. Not the 10-year-old in the pink ribbon. Not the 15-year-old pretending to sleep. Not even the woman who trembled at the sound of footsteps in the hallway. No, this woman stood tall. She had lines on her face not from age, but from surviving. Her shoulders were strong, though they'd carried grief for decades. Her eyes, tired, yes, but bright. Focused, awake. She looked like someone who had crawled out of a grave she never chose. And she was smiling. Not because everything was okay, but because she finally knew she wasn't the one who should have carried the shame. The girl in the mirror, she had faced down monsters. Not in fairy tales, but in churches, in kitchens, in courtrooms, in bedrooms where doors didn't lock from the inside. And she had spoken, not just for herself, but for every girl who never got the chance. The movement didn't stop with us. It grew. More women came forward. The church eventually shut down, reopened under new leadership, stripped of its old name. Its stained glass windows were replaced with plain ones. I heard they removed the pews where those men once sat. Mama now runs a support group from her living room. Women come every Thursday with tears and stories. She bakes cookies. They talk. They cry. They laugh. Aunt Rita plants a new rose bush in her yard every time a girl tells her story. Last I counted, there were 36. And me? I travel now. I speak. I listen. I teach others how to recognize what hides in plain sight. But sometimes, I still wake up in sweat. Still feel the cold hand of memory brushing my shoulder. Still wonder how many little girls out there are sipping warm milk tonight, not knowing what waits on the other side of sleep. And that's why I keep telling the story. That's why I've shared it with you. To anyone listening from the corners of the world, from villages, cities, bedrooms, and buses, if no one else has ever told you this, Let me be the first. You are not crazy. You are not alone. And you are not broken. You are surviving. And soon, you'll be living. This was my story. Told not to reopen wounds, but to prove healing is possible. If this touched something in your heart, if this reminded you of your own fight or someone else's, please like this video. Share it. Comment what country you're listening from. Because every time you speak, you give another girl permission to breathe again. And sometimes, that's the only miracle we need.